All right, and we are live. Hey, welcome to Talkin Doctrine. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, we've got a special guest with us. We've got Kent from the channel A Call to Reason. Uh, the other day, I had looked up, I, you know, I saw a video that said why I left Christianity. And so I clicked on it, watched it, and then the next day, I actually went to work and came home. But because I had clicked on that one, a whole bunch of why I left Christianity videos had popped up in my feed. And Paula, which Kent doesn't know about her yet, but my wife said, "Hey, you should really listen to this one," because she didn't even know I had listened to a video before. But I got through about 3 or 4 minutes. I was like, man, this guy's really got some thinking on this, and he seems like he might want to talk. And I reached out, and shortly thereafter, he responded. And so, we decided to have a discussion, not arguing, because we just want to talk about the differences in what we believe rather than trying to convince each other, I'm right or you're wrong. I thought we'd take a different approach and just have a conversation about it. Because from his channel, I guess the last one that came up was theist, put up or shut up, and it's great. And to be honest, to the viewers and to Kent, after I watched that video, I didn't look at any more videos on his channel because really I wanted to get to know him the same time the viewers did. So we've communicated a couple times over text, and then this is our first time speaking together. So uh, it's been wonderful communications already, and I'm sure the conversation will be edifying and beneficial for both of us and hopefully for the viewers as well. So I'm going to throw it over to Kent, let him introduce himself. I want you guys to check out his channel. It's in the description. And welcome, Kent. How are you today?
Doing pretty well, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks
well,
for having me on.
oh, thank you for coming. Uh, you don't mind introducing yourself? I mean, don't get too particular where you are and stuff like that, and a little bit about your channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was born and raised in a rather specific Southern Baptist style upbringing. Um, it was very core and fundamental to my life. I was not a Sunday morning churchgoer type believer. It's been something since a very young age that drove every aspect of my daily life. I don't know how much of that applies to other people that typically leave the religion, but I do often get the criticism that if you've left the religion, you've never actually been a believer. Um, and that frustrated me a lot when I first started kind of going through this change. And I had a hard time expressing myself because I live in a very conservative area, and most of the people that are in my life are also very religious still and conservative, and so it was hard for me to express myself. So I made the channel in an attempt to kind of just vent myself and put my thoughts out there and see kind of how the general public took to it, whatever percentage of them might actually see my material. So it was a long process of going through this and kind of seeing how I felt about it, but my videos so far have just been a couple that talk about some of the reasons why I left, but I haven't actually done any videos on how the process went down. Just has the reasons. Um,
I gotcha. I
but
gotcha.
here I am now, non-believer. For a while, I called myself agnostic. Upon further investigation into terminology, and the more that I've involved myself in the conversations. I now just call myself an atheist, but to a more specific degree, I do say an agnostic atheist if pressed, but I don't find it necessary because I find that atheist does the trick in most cases.
Right. And actually, I understand what you mean by that. I just learned about theist, agnostic, and a few of the different things. I thought it was just, a theist, a deist, an agnostic, or an atheist. And then I realized there's a whole bunch in between. So when did you? I figured, I figured you had grown up in the church just by um, uh, your watching the first couple minutes of the Why I Left Christianity. I was like, okay, he's one who grew up in the church. I get it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
big time.
so and when my wife and I became believers, we actually thought, both of us, man, I wish I would have grown up in a home where they believed, because it would have been so much easier. It would have been so much quicker to just learn about God and start living for Him. And the more we walk our Christian walk, it's like, no, that's not the case.
Not
There's
always,
so
no.
much. Right, right. Well,
If
see,
it,
for the most part, we see a lot of people leaving the church. But yeah, go. Are you
oh,
one of few or one of many, do you think?
sorry, what was that part?
Do you think you're one of few or one of many
There's
who have grown
actually
up in the church and left?
there's actually a statistic out there, and I won't have numbers for you, but I can say that recent surveys from institutes like the Pew Research Institute have shown that non-belief, or at least non-religiosity, is growing almost exponentially. It's the fastest growing religious demographic is non-religious, the nuns, they say. Um, and a lot of that has to do with people leaving religion that they had. So I would say one of the many, one of the growing many.
Right.
And I'm also in some groups online, and it seems to be a pretty common theme of those in the group that they were raised in a religious environment and have since switched out of it.
Right, right. Okay. That that makes a lot of sense. When did you make the channel?
It was, I believe, little over 2 years ago. Yeah, and it's been hard for me to make any videos on a regular basis because just when I feel like I know enough to say something about something, I learn that I've got something wrong, or I learn that I don't have quite the polished knowledge that I would like to have to actually speak on the issue. Um,
Right. Well,
so it's been touch and go. I think I have six, maybe seven videos, if that. I really don't pay that much. I put them out there and I come and check in on them every once in a while to see how they're doing. I get comments and they pop up on my app so I can see what people are commenting, but I
right.
don't track it all that closely.
Well, I've got a friendly suggestion. I mean, because I get in people try calling me teacher, that I'm a teacher, or get on me for different things. I'm like, no, I'm just talking doctrine. Like, I'm just
Yeah,
talking about it. Like, we're just getting in the Bible and talking about it.
absolutely.
So you could actually start a something to where, it's not that you have to be right and polished on it. You're setting something up to get dialogue so that you can work, talk it out with different people.
Yeah, and that's absolutely. In fact, when you contacted me, it was kind of just like a step in the right direction because I've actually spoken to a few other people that I know. Somebody else in my community that was highly religious growing up. In fact, I think his father is a preacher still. And he's no longer this person is no longer religious himself anymore. Just came out recently, and it was a big thing because he's kind of popular in our community. He's a musician and fairly popular. Um, and I spoke to him and said, if you know anybody that wants to talk, that would like to talk to me as an atheist, and I'm not talking debates, and I think that's where a lot of people get turned off to the idea, is they don't want to have debates necessarily because they don't want to feel pressured and like they're being attacked. And I'm kind of the same way. I go online and I do the debates typed out, but I can go check my facts. I can provide links. I can double check things before I say them, and that helps me to feel more like I'm a little bit justified in whatever it is I say. But I've been planning for a while now to take my channel in that direction of what you were saying, trying to have conversations with people of not just the Christian faith, but different faiths as well. Just speak to them,
Right.
see what their views
I noticed.
on.
I noticed that you did that with your uh, uh, theist put up or shut up.
Oh yeah,
It wasn't about Christianity. It was you actually went and generalized them all.
yeah,
And took the attributes. I was like, that's pretty clever and that's pretty cool. So yeah, no. And I've been. You're on episode 146 right now, so I've been doing
oh wow,
the broadcast for a little while now. I don't use the headphones all the time because a lot of times we use the camera. I was set up to turn my camera on if you were using yours, but I'm just a chameleon in that sense. Whatever's comfortable for the guest, I'll just match them. So.
oh yeah,
Uh, but the I can help you with setting them broadcasts up, and it's a little tricky at first, but I've talked several people through on the phone already, so I can help you with that.
yeah. That would be very helpful because it's been something that for me it's been hard to even really comprehend where I feel because I grew up in a particular religion. It was to me it was reality. I did had that feeling. You see the stars in the night sky and you attribute that to the creation and the creator, and I'm seeing the whole world again almost anew through a new lens, and it's fascinating to me that I can do that. It's absolutely incredible. If you rewound the clock 5 to 10 years back when I was pretty solid in my beliefs and told me that this is where I'd be, I probably wouldn't believe you. I'd think you were crazy for sure. And here I am trying to cope with all that, and I realize, and one of the reasons that I left, and I won't delve too deep into it, but one of the reasons that I left was the variety of faith out there. Um, the fact that so many different people believe so many different conflicting ideas about the God question or the spiritual question, and they're all equally convinced. When that was internalized for me, once that really sank in, and I thought about the weight of what that means, that started a feedback loop of doubt. Got me thinking. So now, as an outsider with no faith, I want to speak to people of those other faiths, see how they think about other faiths, and see what they think of those with no faith, and just kind of open up that conversation because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about what atheism is, what atheists do and think, and um, even if it makes sense to have a label of atheist in certain ways of thinking. There are some ways in which it applies clearly, and there are other ways in which talking about atheists as a group makes no sense.
Okay, I get where you're coming from. Um, I get exactly where you're coming from. And that dialogue would be very interesting, especially because coming from my point of view, I'm wanting to have dialogue with the same. kind of for the same reason. But to to get more about your background,
Sure.
Southern. Well, if you don't mind, how old are you?
I'm 28.
28.
Yes.
Okay. I'm 38, so I'm a decade older. So you were born in 90, I'm guessing.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
1990.
I was born in 80. Um, all right. And so you said 5 years ago, so that's 23. You
Yeah.
were strong in what you believed.
I think that's probably about the time when the first doubts were kicking in.
I
When I
got you.
started to, um, for the first time, seriously entertain the thought that I might be wrong and I should probably look into it and see if that's the case.
I got you. So seriously, so not too serious was even before that. So maybe
Sure.
around 21, 20.
I would say from a young age, I'd have questions that would make
Okay.
me think, does this seem right? But I'd always fall back on the faith issue. Um, it would just be, well, I've had these experiences. Well, this particular thing doesn't make too much sense to me, but there was that time that I had that feeling or that thing happened, and that had to be God. So obviously, I'm on the right track. There's just something I don't understand. Would be kind of how I got through those in the past.
Right, right. No, I hear you. Um, and so it got stronger
Right.
basically when you were beginning to reason as an adult.
Absolutely.
Always as a child, but when you reached adulthood was when it
When
was like,
I
all right,
reached a stage in my life, I had gone through a divorce a little while before, and the relationship I was in was very controlling, um, against me. I was the one being controlled. I know usually it's the men that do the controlling, but this was kind of a flip side. Um, and my life before that, before relationships, really hadn't been much different. My parents had a lot of control over me. And you're in church and you have authority figures over you that tell you when you have the questions, they tell you this is how we're going to look at it and this is how we're going to get through these doubts. And I wouldn't say I resent that. It felt right. It helped me. It made me feel good. I never hated my religion when I had it. I was very happy with it. I was involved as I could be, pretty much all the time. Um, and even on a regular basis, I would say amongst the people that I knew from my church and other religious people I knew growing up, I would say I think, and this may just be my own personal bias towards myself, but I think um, I was more adherent to the biblical teachings than a lot of people that I knew. It actually changed the way I thought and acted. I didn't lust. I didn't want to steal. I tried not to use bad language, and I tried to be nice to people. I kind of became even though I was something of a nerd, I kind of became a vigilante in junior high. Put myself in danger to help other people a few times because I thought it was what I should do. And
I
you know,
gotcha.
it, yeah.
Are your parents are your parents still strong in the religion?
Yeah, they are. Well, so my dad, I was in high school. I lived with my dad and my stepmom. Um, from the time before that, I lived with my grandparents for about 7 or 8 years, and they were very religious. Um, and my grandpa has since passed, but my grandma is still very religious. My stepmom has also passed, and my father is still very religious, but my mom has never been religious. So, um, and that always made me sad growing up. I always thought that was a terrible thing, and I tried to talk to her from time to time. but I didn't want to alienate her either, so I just kind of took it easy on her.
Right. Okay. I gotcha. Okay. Um, all right. So that's an interesting uh part of the of your story. Growing up very religious with grandparents, but then having uh dad and mom split on it. I don't
Yep.
know if I've come across that too much. So your mom and you, has y'all's relationship grown more since you've
In a lot of
flipped?
ways, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's grown from that, but there's definitely an area of understanding that wasn't there before. I think her and I got closer again, even while I was still a believer. Um, so that didn't really change much, except now she um, is able to tell me like the some of the ways that the religion influenced the thinking of my other family members had effects on her growing up and how she was able to interact with myself and my brothers and whatnot, and able to kind of point that out and say things, like, see, this is kind of how this affected me, and we're able to kind of talk that through because I don't think she's not anywhere near on the same page I am. In fact, she's kind of said that she thinks maybe there's something more out there, and I don't. I consider myself a pure naturalist. I don't think there's anything else out there at all. I think there's the physical world and the effects it has, and pretty much nothing else.
I gotcha. Okay. Um, that's interesting. And so from basically a 3 year stint went, or 5 years, maybe
It was
28,
it took about,
5 years.
I would say, 2 to 3 years
Right,
until I was
because you've
pretty
been
sure. Yeah, about 22 to 23. I think it was 23 area that I started having my doubts, and then by the time I made the video about 2 years ago, I was already, I believe, a few months pretty sure of my position of not believing in Christianity specifically. I wasn't an atheist yet. In fact, I actually became something of like a loose pagan. I started like dabbling in crystal magic, um, like meditation, attempting like transcendental meditation. Um, I still meditate, but I just do it for focus and for uh, essentially just the mental health benefits of it, which are purely natural. There are other things that people try to do with it, and I question the validity of some of that, but that's a different story.
Well, that
I
was actually, you say it's a different story, but it answers my question. But um, for viewership, and so I'm not assuming, um, when you were saying pure natural, nothing else out there, like you don't believe in anything spiritual at all, like what we would find in the pagan religions, and through transcendental meditation type stuff.
No,
Uh,
no, I don't believe in astral projection. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in magical healing crystals. Uh, any like spells, incantations. I don't think any of that does anything other than the way that it affects your perception of things. I believe
and
all those things have a way of affecting, and it's the same way I see prayer. Is that when you make that mental effort to affect the world, it changes the way that you see the world. In a way, of course, you can't, flip everything upside down and defy gravity just because you said a prayer. But if you're going through a hard time and you ask for guidance or wisdom to get through it, you're more likely to feel guided and wise enough to get through it. And that's my take. I wouldn't try to tell people that their prayers don't work. I mean, I don't think they do. but I think it only works as much as they believe it does,
No,
and
no,
sometimes a little
that's
less.
right. I mean, uh, uh that's legit. You know, I mean, coming from a naturalist point of view, that's where it would be. So you consider the conscience just in the brain, and
Absolutely.
the uh, when the flesh is gone, there's no
Right.
conscience. Gotcha.
So a good metaphor that's thrown around is that it's like a flame. Consciousness is like a flame. It's a process. You have the mechanisms in place that create a flame, and when those processes stop, the flame doesn't go somewhere. It just stops. It goes. It's just gone. And I believe consciousness is the same thing. I believe it's an emergent uh, feature of the way that certain animal brains work. And I believe ours is probably one of the more complex. Kind of hard to tell. There are some other animals out there that show some pretty complex signs, but due to language limitations, it's hard to tell exactly how deep their consciousness runs and how complex it is.
Right. Okay. I mean, I see. Um, I never got to where you were,
Mm-hmm.
but I was agnostic for about 10 years.
Okay.
I
Where
grew up
did you come from?
I
Okay.
Catholic. I grew up
And now
Catholic, and
you consider yourself
I believe the Bible 100% now.
okay. Do
Um,
you consider
I
yourself Catholic or non-denominational, just Christian, Protestant, anything like that?
see, because that's a tough one. Um, because uh, there's non-denominational is actually a denomination
It
of
kind of is.
itself.
Yeah, I think it's
But
universalist that kind of sees it all as
uh,
multiple paths to one destination. That's one of the things I've got to figure out when I start doing
universalism, yeah.
more of
Well,
the
I don't mind helping you out with that universalism. They think everyone is going to heaven, no matter
oh,
what they
okay.
believe. It's like the salvation is universal for everybody.
Okay.
Um, and they see from my perspective, what Satan has done is tried to muddy the water. So, I didn't actually become a believer until I was 29. So I went the other way around. And when I uh, uh, when I realized I had been lied to my whole life about everything, I was like, wow. Um, I realized that if I'm gonna believe the Bible, I need to go and just learn from the Bible.
Okay.
So uh,
So you
I went
started
to Bible.
doing kind of like an independent, learning it your own way kind of thing instead of following a specific path, kind of.
Correct, and not my own way, but just getting into the Word.
Okay.
Because I didn't believe God was real. Well, I wanted to believe God was real, but I didn't see. I thought Catholics were Christian, and
Right.
so when I realized that the Bible is just talking over and over against Catholicism, um, it actually made me really mad that I had been lied to, even in that manner. Like there's a verse in there where it says, "Call no man father." And I was like
Right.
thinking, "Oh, Father Kevin, Father Mike, oh, I hate you guys. I was
Isn't
going to
that a bit
you."
strange? It's
You're right.
a bit strange how you can read. Well, and here's, I mean, this may be some food for thought, but probably something you've already thought about is you were raised in that sect of the religion, and they see those things. Those verses are there for them to read, but they have ways to get around it that they feel are legitimate, and that I'm convinced that nobody, well, few people, I shouldn't say nobody. I think very few people believe or follow a religion but don't actually believe it's true, especially not the higher ups, the people who are leading the church. I mean, there are some out there. Of course, there's the Clergy Project. I don't know if you've heard of that. Um, but I think for the most part, those people that are, having these conversations and trying to figure out like, well, what do we believe and how does it line up with the scriptures? Catholics and call it Father so and so, and yet the Bible says not to. They have a way of getting around that, and I found that was true, very true for my particular uh, belief system that I grew up with.
Right.
I mean, there
What
were
was the gospel that you grew up with?
it was mostly fundamentalist, very literal reading. I mean, I had the whole. I was against evolution, not at all. There was kind of like the, oh yeah, sure, you have ground squirrels and flying squirrels. Maybe those came from some common squirrel in past, and they've evolved since then, but not people from an ape type ancestor. That couldn't be. But even farther than that, it was the age of the earth, following that um, uh, 6 to 10,000 year period that's laid out by, oh, I forget his name, Pope, might have been Pope Gregory or some other, I forget, I'm probably getting them mixed up. Uh, that was pretty much my view of the whole creation issue. And then there was the gospel, which I was of the camp that says through faith, not by works. And I know there's still some controversy in there, and there's some finer points even in those that agree with me. They say yes, it's through the faith, but without the, or if your works aren't showing it, then your faith probably isn't true, like that kind of situation. But I was of the mindset that if you believe in it, if you have faith in it and just believe it, then you're saved.
Right.
That
Um,
Jesus died for your sins, and that you'll be forgiven, and you'll enter into heaven situation.
right. Right. I gotcha. Um, and what about uh, eternal life? Like, when do
I
you receive that?
Okay, so purgatory issue, yeah. That was or when does the salvation occur? Is that what you were asking?
Uh, yeah, basically, when does somebody get eternal life from, if they believe they're saved, but what if they stop believing? Are they still saved?
That was something that I had to ask at one point a while back, and I believe I was shown, and I don't remember specifically where this is, but I do remember growing up with the notion of the once saved, always saved mentality, that if you actually believed it, and you fully, truly, really believed it, and you weren't just saying so because you thought other people might want you to say that, or because you thought it was what the cool kids were doing, that you could never undo that. It would always be there with you. That was what I grew up with.
Right. No, I mean that is actually that is what I believe myself.
Okay.
But I actually go a bit further. We do preach a doubtless gospel here.
And that is
One that it's it's not decisionism. You don't make yourself believe. You can't make yourself believe anything in life. That's just make
sure.
believe.
Yeah, you can't control your beliefs. You're either convinced it's true or you're not. I fully support that.
and fully persuaded is the terminology we use because it's the biblical terminology.
Right.
So the
And I sure was. I
well,
I I got
oh, we'll see. And also, here's another thing.
go ahead.
I don't believe children can get saved.
Okay.
I think that they're safe, but when you speak as a child, understand as a child, you know, you have to put away childish things before you can be converted as a child in order to get saved. Like you got to go back to
Right.
what it was like to just believe anything that the person you trust told you. Because as a child, if your grandparents uh, weren't there leading, if it was just your mom, and then and she was the only one influencing you, you would have believed whatever she told you, and you would have
Right.
probably been an atheist the whole time you were there. So um, that I people get on to me, especially other believers, and some people who I would think and have to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that, yeah, they are my brother and sister, but they would listen to this conversation and say, yeah, you were saved. If you believe then and you believed, it doesn't matter. There's a verse that they take out of context that says, if you believe not, he is faithful. He cannot deny himself. They'll take that
Right.
one verse out of context and then try to say, see, look, but they ignore other verses where it says, "Those who went out from us went out from us to manifest to us that they were not all of us."
Sure.
Because um, many people uh, actually, because they wanted to believe or tried to make themselves believe, they think that's the reason why that they're saved, and it's just a works-based religion
Okay.
anyways.
So I'm not going to harass you or give you a hard time about this, but
Oh, no,
so
no, no.
your point of view then would be that if I believed at a younger age, probably because I had been kind of raised in that environment, and that's just what I thought, kids being gullible, more or less, then that doesn't validate me as a true believer, um, as someone who actually believed it uh,
As an adult.
as an adult. Okay.
Correct. Right. And I actually think that a 19-year-old atheist, if they died, they'd actually go to heaven.
At
Because,
19.
well, I think the Bible's clear. 20 years old is the age when God considers somebody an adult. That's when they can go to war. That's when they can even bring sacrifices to the temple. So if you look at numbers, they weren't even numbered with the congregation until they were 20. So
Okay.
I just I think that when you become an adult and you start understanding things and really reasoning, that's when it matters, who do you believe, the world or God? Not when you're a child, because you're going to believe whatever your parents told you. It doesn't, like, if you grew up in Islam, you believe Muslim,
Right.
like, so
Absolutely. And
it's just the, go ahead.
I take
Sorry.
that. No, sorry. I totally agree with that. It's one of the big arguments, if you will, one of the counter arguments against theism is that it seems so dependent. How you view it seems so dependent on your geographical
Where you came from.
location for your upbringing.
Thing.
If you're raised in India, you're most likely, not entirely, but you're most likely going to be a Hindu. And if you're raised from certain areas of the Middle East, you're most likely a Muslim. And if you're from the Far East, you're going to be a Taoist or a Buddhist. Uh, and the majority of the landscape of the world, yeah, most of those people come out as Christian. Um, and it
Right.
just makes me wonder where do you stand on spiritual experiences? Like if
Oh, those are, I mean, which denomination you want to talk? You want to talk about the burning bosom of the Mormon? I mean,
I would say in general, if
right.
so,
There,
okay, I guess more
spiritual
importantly, what brought
experiences
you?
are real. What brought me?
Yeah, what brought you into
Uh,
confirming and deciding that you do believe for sure after your period of doubt?
right. Well, I had thrown it all away for about 10 years. And
Right.
when I got uh, a daughter, I realized here I am, 27 years old. I haven't not doing, I was bartending, I was making
Okay.
really good money doing it, but um, I didn't, uh, I didn't want to have that my legacy. So I was like, what can I do to help this world for my daughter's sake? I hadn't even thought about the generation prior, and here I have this little one. And that's all I care about is bringing her up. So I started doing a lot of research, and I, it, I, it, I realized that, uh, that, and I know this will sound crazy to you probably, but realized that there were some conspiracies out there that I couldn't deny as being plausible. And I'll
Okay.
tell the first one was the 9/11 thing.
Okay.
Uh, um, because when that happened, I was 21, so you had to have been 11.
Right. Yeah.
And dude, I was about ready to go in the army. Like I was, or whatever military force, because I was ready to go fight whoever. Like I bought the the patriotism aspect of that hook, line, and sinker.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know why something came up. Oh, I went to jail. I went to jail. See, and I can look back and be like, thank you, God. Because I would have done that. I would have gone in and I would have killed people or gotten killed myself, whatever the case may be, because I fell for it. But in 2007 was when I was researching different things, I realized, wait, no matter what happened, it was the official story is not true. Like there's no way the official story could be accurate.
Okay.
And
So you became convinced that there was some other underlying truth behind
behind that, correct.
that incident. Yeah.
That incident, correct. And so because I was gonna change my life because of that incident, and I realized I had been duped about that. What else have I been lied to about? So that's when I went on. That's actually when I was like, I want to learn truth. I don't care what it is. I just want to know the truth.
That is really interesting actually because I one of the big motivating factors that got me moving was I got involved in another conspiracy theory was the ancient alien theory.
Right. I learned a lot
And
about that in my research.
I became convinced that it was true. And I
Shortly,
was watching it.
short. I want you to keep going, but shortly before I believed the Bible, I was out on my back porch saying, "Aliens, I know you're true. I want you to show yourself. I want to be. I want to be or I want you to reveal yourself to me." So no, go ahead. I just wanted
No,
to
that's
throw that in
wild.
there. Right.
Um,
It's crazy, but yeah.
yeah, I had gotten into it. I don't think it had anything to do, and maybe a psychologist will tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think it had anything to do with the divorce I had. But I was living with my mom between uh, like moving out of that and finding my own place, and she had cable. And one day I just was flipping through the channels and came across the show and thought, this is really interesting stuff. And it got me thinking, and I was just hooked. I watched it as often as I could. I bought the first season on DVD, and I watched it quite often, and I was completely convinced it was true. And I sat there thinking one day, like, how stupid are people that they don't see that this is the thing, that this is true. They're just not even wanting to give it a shot. And then it hit me when I was watching a certain episode that had something to do with how it tied into the Bible, that I was believing this, and yet it was completely contradictory to everything I believed from my religious upbringing. And I realized something's going to have to give here. Well, it turns out in the long shot, they both gave. And now I don't take either of those approaches, but it's interesting to me that it was something, that feeling of distrust for you, that what you had been raised on was not the truth, and it came to you through having an exposure to a different cover up kind of situation, just like how it happened to me.
Right. That's awesome, dude. That's a lot of similarities there. And
Yeah.
it's
So after
funny
you had
because
that,
we
sorry, I was going to have you go ahead and get back on track if you like. I just wanted to toss that in there.
right, no, because um uh it is, see, and well, where did you go? See, I where did you go from the whole alien thing? Because it was just a few months before. Oh, you know what? Uh, for it was just a few months before, but it wasn't the aliens that brought me to the Bible.
Sure. For me, well, what it was I decided that I had the video evidence of the truth of the alien theory. I I had their stories. I had them. Okay, this is their evidence. Here's the pyramids. Here's these energy lines. Here's these big monolithic structures. And okay, so there's their evidence. Now let me go back to what I believed growing up. I mean, at this point, I'm still like, man, I believe in God, but at the same time, I was over here like I had compartmentalized it without even realizing it. It wasn't at any point like I thought, oh, God made the aliens and the aliens did this. It was just God, and then I just got sucked into this alien thing just without ever connecting the dots until at one point, probably like 4 or 5, maybe 6 months later. And it finally hit me, and I went, holy crap. I've been believing two completely contradictory things. I mean, I was still praying, I was still occasionally reading my Bible. I wasn't really going to church at the time, but I had long since been of the mind that I didn't need it. I had everything I needed. I had my personal relationship. I didn't need to go to church, you know? Um, and this just kind of snuck in. So I started investigating. I started watching debates on YouTube. I joined debate groups on Facebook and tried to see what people were saying, tried to put in my 2 cents, and I was way out of my league. I didn't know anything um, compared to what most of the people in the debate groups go on about. I was pretty ignorant, and then I started realizing that the whole evolution topic was a big part of the debate community. So many people in the same position that I had been in, denying evolution. Well, evolution is kind of part of the alien conspiracy. They think evolution happened and the aliens came in and kind of aided it at some point to kind of make us as a prized uh, outcome, whether it's the worker theory or some of the other ones. But and eventually, I came to realize evolution is true. The evidence for it is completely unequivocal, overwhelming, and not dependent on anybody's say so. It's all there. You can see it yourself. You can put the pieces together yourself and see that there's really no other uh, possible conclusion. I mean, you can believe in theistic evolution if you like, and I know a lot of people do. But for me, that was the final straw. I thought, so you've got some
That's
fun stories over here.
hilarious. That's hilarious. I fun because the final straw for me was to look into creation.
Oh, really? So going down the creation path for you led you to accept the veracity of the Bible.
It's funny your name's Kent, which
Kent
because
Hovind.
right.
Oh boy.
Um, it's and dude, I'm in Pensacola,
Oh no.
and
Oh,
I
you get
didn't
to go see
even.
the museum from time to time, huh?
Well, it's been shut down. It was shut down before
When you went to
I,
jail?
yeah, when he went to jail. But I remember hearing about it, but I thought that was crazy back then. I
Yeah.
believed in, I was a theist evolution as a Catholic, and I
Okay. Yeah,
believed
because
in
they do generally accept evolution in the Catholic Church. So yeah.
correct, right. God just started the Big Bang. So evolution, you know, I knew all the proofs. I believed it. You know, that was where I was at. And then even agnostic believed that. And then when I started going into the Bible, I was like, okay, so could the Bible be real? I was like, if I'm going to believe the Bible, I'm going to believe the whole thing. So can creation be possible? And so I started looking into it. And then I came away with the exact opposite, that there's actually more proof for creation than there is for evolution. And that
Sure.
was the final straw for me. Now, it wasn't the final straw of when I got saved, but it was the
Right.
final straw for me to be like, okay, I'm really gonna take my next truth research into the Bible. So to get back on my story, well, I want to hear yours, but yeah, we'll get back to mine in just a second. I know where I left off. But you were saying the funny story. There's funny stories over here, and there's
There's interesting and convincing stories on both sides. Well, I should say on multiple sides of whatever conversation you want to have, whether it's the 9/11 story or it's the alien story or the biblical story or just general um, uh, religious spiritual ideas. They've all got stories that, if they make sense to you, if the way it's presented to you makes sense to you, it can be really convincing. And that's where reasoning came in. That's where I started discovering. So the whole evolution thing, I remember the Nye Ham debate. I believe that's 2014 that happened. I was still kind of on the fence. I believe at that
okay.
time
I remember that.
I was leaning towards evolution, and I was curious. I watched it legitimately, and I made a post every year on the anniversary of the day I watched it. I don't think I watched it when it first came out, but on the day of the anniversary of the day that I watched it, I get to see on my Facebook memories this post come up, this long diatribe of me saying how Nye had failed to prove his point, and I think Ham won the debate. And I did say that I don't think that means necessarily that he's right, but I think he did better in the debate. And every time I do, I just face palm myself because I wish I could talk to that version of myself and show him where the logic had gone wrong, because I hadn't yet learned how to use proper reasoning, how to use critical thinking, how to check for and encounter um, logical fallacies, how to identify and avoid logical biases. I hadn't learned any of that yet. So the more convincing story, because he was so charismatic, because his presentation, I guess, was a little bit more somehow convincing to me at the time. I kind of took his side. It didn't make me believe in creation, but I did say, yeah, you know what? I think Nye kind of blew it on that debate, which was really, it's still interesting for me to look back on because I still don't know how I came to that conclusion, but I can see it. It's right there in black and white on my screen. Uh,
Right. Well, I can I think I know why. Like, because Nye came into it with a smug. Like, if he would have came into it more um uh, uh respectful. No, I actually
okay.
think I don't think Ham did a good job at all, to be honest. I was like at the end of it, I was like, that whole thing was horrible. It was horrible on both ends. Like, so but you know, Nye could have destroyed Ham if he would have just treated him as a as an equal intellect, but because
Right.
he wanted to try to smug and put down, you know, like, ha ha ha, 6,000 years, you know, like, no, just meet him at the intellect, and Nye would have really destroyed him because Ham doesn't even have the right gospel. You know, like
Yeah.
they there's see, I call them hidden works because there's many people who preach grace through faith alone, but yet they're still relying something on the for themselves in order to get to heaven. So, you know, like, they'll say it's grace, but really when you pin them down, it's always works.
Right.
So, and ham is definitely one of them. I remember where I was in that time. So that was like, yeah, that's the timing that we're talking about 3-4 years ago.
You
Uh,
were you were going through, well,
oh
by
no,
that
no, no,
time
no,
you were
no.
already, no.
I was already convinced. I got convinced in 2009.
Okay.
Um, I so I told you about the aliens. I
Right.
was out on my deck, and um, you know what my research had brought me to. There's an elite group that, for some reason, not for money, not necessarily for power, because they could buy power for money with the money
Right.
that they had. I didn't get it, but I realized it funneled through the Federal Reserve. I mean, this place is not part of the country. It's a private bank. It's not federal. It has no reserve. It literally prints the money out of thin air.
Right.
And that's why the Constitution, I mean, our forefathers. So I got into politics, and because I was, like I said, I was really trying to make the world a better place for my young daughter. That was my motivation. And I didn't get this consolidation. And, even looking back at monarchies, looking at his story,
Hmm.
you can just see uh, the uh, uh, consolidation of power and just getting closer or more and more. I didn't get it, and I got in. So I realized that the Federal Reserve was the problem, and got involved with a End the Fed uh, program, and also learned about a presidential candidate who had just lost, um, that was preaching that was uh, talking against and saying let's end the Federal Reserve, and that was Ron Paul.
Oh yeah.
And so I went to a Ron Paul meeting, and at the Ron Paul meeting I met several people who, I didn't even realize they were Christian for the first couple months. But then after several meetings, getting to know them and really talking about all the things I've been learning for the past 2 years. And I remember one time saying, like, I just don't get it. Like, it's like they're trying to destroy the currencies. It's like they're trying to make a one world government.
Right.
And
Yeah.
why is the reason for this? I'm looking all around. The globalist is what the truthers will call them. And so then somebody said, well, the Bible says that's what's going to happen at the very end. I was like, what? Who cares? The Bible's not. And it took several weeks of researching, looking at videos, and talking it over with different people. I would say a few months. Um, before I was like, all right, well, I will, if this is the truth, I don't care what the truth is. This is what I said 3 years ago, or it was 2.5 years ago at the time. Um, and I was like, if this is the truth, and my wife, she was so pagan, she had the evolution thing on her car, and I
Oh yeah.
remember her saying, uh, that she wanted to know the truth too, as long as the truth wasn't Christianity. Like, she did not want it to be Christianity because of all the hypocrites and all the different experiences she had with supposed Christians growing up. Is really was her
Sure.
bias.
Yeah, that can
Um,
push you away.
right. Um, and so for me, it took me about from between 6 and 9 months. I don't know the exact date I got fully persuaded, but I know that there was a time when I was just searching it out to like, if this is true, I'll check it out, to a point where I was like, this is absolute truth. I believe this more than I believe myself. So uh, I couldn't tell you the exact date,
Okay.
but I
It was
do
more of a
think,
process, more of a uh, like a spectrum, sort of like it kind of came
well,
on
the
over time.
Bible, uh, the Bible puts it as, put on your yoke and learn of me. So the learning of who Jesus is, what he's done, like all the basics, all the things that, you know, come with that is kind of a process. It doesn't just come automatically, but at the moment of salvation, even if you can't um, identify exactly when it was, that that is not a process that's like immediate.
Okay.
So I don't want to confuse you. It's certainly not a process at the moment of salvation, but what we
Getting to the
preach
point where
here,
you accept it
fully trust, fully
is
trust.
a process, and then it hits at one point.
Right, right. Oh, well, I would say, the verse where it says, "I believe, help me with my unbelief." That would be
Yeah.
somebody accepting it, but they haven't been fully persuaded until, God. That's a work of God. He was
Okay.
not willing that any would perish. He wants everybody to come to repentance, but it is a work of God to place the understanding from someone's head, which is, I believe, their soul, their mind, their will and emotion, their psyche. And then he places that information. He does it by putting it into their spirit. So for from my perspective, for you, is that I do think somebody did you well and that you learned a lot of scriptures growing up. But it's not until you're an adult and you humbly seek God that he'll actually use those scriptures that you've learned and give you the understanding, eh, to where you can be fully persuaded and place that understanding in your heart. Like that would be a work of God by you saying, okay, God, uh, if you're real, I could be wrong on all this. I don't know. But now that I'm an adult, now that I know that I've got to come to it from me and not from somebody telling me what's true, but from me to you. Um, you know, show me. I'm gonna reason with you. In fact,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna use this verse because Isaiah 118, where God Himself is saying, come and reason with me,
Absolutely.
and though your sins be as scarlet, I'll make them white as snow. So, um, and then if you were to believe that it would actually be supernatural, like the my knowing of him is is not something that you can get carnally. That's why there's so many different denominations from scripture. They look at the same verses and they stumble over them and think that they have to do something or not do something rather than just believe.
I
Um,
grew up with a very similar view to that. I mean, your take on the age of ability of the age of
accountability.
reason is a little different from what I was raised with. Um, from my uh, upbringing, I believe it was either 8 or 13, but either way, um, for me, I believe the first time that I became convinced it was true was when I was like 6. And I remember hitting about 8 or 9 and thinking, I've learned so much more since then. and and then again when I believe it was 14, And I think that was the last time that I made one of those kind of, we call them rededications, where
Right.
I acknowledged that I hadn't been living as purely as I had promised I would. But at no point in between the youngest age and the older age did I feel like I didn't believe.
Right.
Um, and I, especially now as a naturalist, I'm fully willing to concede that I was just uh, raised with it. But I will tell you this, that there was no part of me that didn't think it was true. I had questions about specifics, but not questions that were
Right. Of
at
course
the
not.
time detrimental. It was I
Right.
believe, but hey, what's the deal with this? And I remember the main one. I mean, it's not really an issue for me now, but the one of the main ones that used to keep me up at night was, what about the people that haven't heard? And the reason it kept me up was because I got conflicting answers. Some would
Right.
say, well, that's why we do mission work. We're trying to reach them all. And I'm like, oh, great. So the people we don't miss, or the people we do miss, the ones we don't get to, SOL. And then I've got the answer that, well, those who haven't heard aren't held accountable. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's great. But then why are we telling everybody? Because if we tell them and they don't believe, now they're accountable. We could have just left them alone and they would have been fine. That was
Right.
kind of my mentality when I was younger.
No,
Um,
no, and that's logical. That's very
you know,
logical. And it's see, and that's why you have to be converted as a child, because children will believe anything they're told from somebody they trust. And
absolutely.
so that's why that's why, because I preach to children. It's not that they shouldn't be preached to. They can learn the scriptures. In fact, there's one that I'm not trying to preach to you by any means. I know I'm bringing up different verses, but I get all of what I believe from scripture. You know what I mean? So I do
Right.
have a little bit of circular reasoning, but there is a part where
As long
Paul
as
is
you acknowledge it,
talking.
that's great.
Right. No, I do. I do. I didn't always, but if it's true belief, if the Bible is what is my ultimate authority, it's got to be circular reasoning. But then so is the same for atheists. It's just they have more books. They just don't have one book. They've got many books. Um,
For sure. I,
but it does go back to um, who you're putting your faith in. You know.
I'll make a quick addendum there, and I'll say, as an atheist, it's not really about a who, it's about a what. And here, this is, I mean, I won't go too deep. Just a quick aside is, from my perspective, the only things that I hold as that I'll admit are circular, but I will say necessarily so, is that we trust in the ability to reason. And not only is that my point of view, but it's yours as well.
Amen.
And I know a lot of people don't think so, but the more you think about it, it has to be, because any explanation you try to give to me as to why you don't use reason, you're trying to reason with me. So one
Right.
basic standing stone that we all stand on is the ability to reason,
Amen.
which is where I got the name of my channel, called to reason. Let's actually reason, and let's not let other things get in the way. Let's not let other beliefs and things get in the way. Let's use real, solid reason on the basis that we all stand on and see what we come to.
Amen. No, exactly. Now, there are some things that are just unreasonable that I do believe now, such as a donkey that saw an angel that was about to kill
Well,
Balaam.
and
Yeah.
if a supernatural God exists, it's not really all that unreasonable. I'm willing to concede that.
Right.
I mean, if we're talking about a natural world, a talking donkey is absurd. If we're talking about a world in which there is a God that can intervene and that created it all and can do anything he wants to it, then of course, talking donkey, not that crazy. Whatever, no big deal. I mean, cool, but not unreasonable.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Well, no, I gotcha. That's
yeah,
awesome that you can see it from that way, because there are you're absolutely right. There's things that uh, with a deity it makes sense. Without a deity, of course not.
right,
Um,
absolutely.
so, No, that's see, and we've come to our conclusions basically through the same paths, but
It's pretty
crossed
interesting
each
stuff.
other.
I,
Pretty
I did
darn
not
interesting.
expect to see so much overlap. I mean, of course, I expected overlap, but yeah, that I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of people this in depth. Most people are shut down. Um, at my career, I'm a hairstylist. I cut people's hair, and I talk to people when I cut their hair, and I have to avoid this subject like the plague. As annoying as it is, I would like to have those conversations, but people are so judgmental. Like I said, I live in a very conservative area, so
Right.
any sort of hint that
You can
uh,
lose customers.
I'm not a believer,
Right.
it could affect me. I could get fired because I work for a company. I'm not independent. You know, if I start a problem, if I say something that rubs somebody the wrong way, they could complain. I could lose my job.
Right.
And Yeah, so I have to avoid that. But I'd like to have these conversations, and this is a very eye-opening experience, and I wouldn't mind coming on again for another topic even. Um,
Awesome.
One
Awesome.
thing that actually stands out to me is the evolution thing, which I know it would be difficult to discuss rather than debate, but if we could pull it off, I think that would be very interesting.
Oh yeah, of course, dude. You'll have to look at some of the channel or some of the previous broadcasts. I know there's a bunch and they go long. See, because I'll let them go as long as the conversation goes. For me,
Right.
for me, it is a ministry that kind of fell in my lap. I'm like, and I was like, so Lord, as long as you got me working, I'm here to work. But I
Yeah,
can say that I do enjoy speaking to all sorts of people, especially when they're as nice as you. Um,
I take that approach. I know there's a lot of not very nice atheists out there that are just they're more abrasive, they're more, and like throughout this whole conversation, I mean, I can count off the top of my head about 6 times that I could have said something mean or, snide and arrogant, and that's just not my take. I know a few other atheists that would, um,
right,
and personally, I know them, and I couldn't help think of them and think of what they would have said in those moments, and the fact that I just don't have that approach. I'd rather understand what you think and why. And as long as the courtesy is returned, then there's no ill will, and I feel no need to strike out against you for saying or believing something that I think is a bit off. Uh, and I don't think that there are clearly are crazy people out there, but I don't think believing like, so-called crazy things necessarily makes you crazy. It it's all tied together. Everything you believe ties together to create. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with the book "The Big Picture" by Sean Carroll.
no, I'm not.
Okay, he's a theoretical physicist at Caltech. He's an excellent debater. He's a scientist, but he also has a love for philosophy. So he engages in debates, and he wrote this book that is a collection of both his philosophical standpoints and just outright science, and it's just fascinating. Anybody that's listening hasn't read that book, believe it or not, I recommend you believe it. And if you, or sorry, I recommend that you read it. Um, get your hands on it. Watch one of his lectures on it. Obviously, they're shorter than reading the whole book. You don't get the whole thing. But he talks about something called planets of belief. And if you think about how planets are made, they're an accumulation of matter that they all just draw together and they create this whole planet. And it's like that with your beliefs. You believe that the Bible is true. And something that fits together with that is that creation is true rather than evolution. And all of those beliefs come together and it creates
That's
a
interesting.
coherent planet. So even though you may be wrong, I won't say you are, I think you are, but even though you may be wrong, the things that you believe all cohere together, and that makes up your planet of belief. Now, it would be weird if you had that planet of belief and somewhere in there was, that when you die, you'll be reincarnated as a dog. That would be weird. It wouldn't fit into your planet. It would be an odd piece that doesn't mesh.
Right.
Um,
Now, I do have odd pieces that don't mesh with most of Christianity, but I
your
do think
own,
I got them. I do think I got them all from the Bible. One of them would be the 20 years old for the age of
right?
accountability. You know,
Yeah,
so
and that's your own, and it fits into because you believe that a
the
verse in the
Bible.
Bible says that, or areas of the Bible
No,
indicate
right,
that,
right,
and you believe that the Bible is true. So then you believe that to be
cor-
the case, and that all fits together. Whether or not it's actually true, different story. But that's your
correct,
world of belief. Now you'd be
correct.
crazy if you believed that simultaneously that you are a person living here on Earth, and you believe you were born from your parents, but you also believe that you were sent from Mars on a secret mission to infiltrate the U.S. government. Then you'd be crazy because that doesn't fit together. And that's to me, that's the definition of crazy. So
Right.
uh,
Okay.
while the beliefs
Okay.
themselves may be crazy, I don't think you are.
Right. No, I hear you, and I appreciate that. I get that that a lot of atheists do just automatically look at people like me, especially me, who's like, "Hey, the Bible. I believe the Bible more than I believe my own self." Um,
Yeah,
they think
that's a bit
that
odd, but it's your thing.
right. Well, I go off the verse, the heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Right.
So again, it's circular reasoning to the but I also was 29 years old when or 28 when I started looking into the Bible. 29 when I was actually saved. But so I was already a grown ass man, so
Right. Yeah.
and had already rejected it and was like really thought that I wanted to believe there was a God, but I didn't think any religion was right, that he
Right.
was too big to be known, and he certainly wouldn't make himself known through a book.
Right. Right.
Um,
I took that exact stance for probably a year.
r-
Was maybe there's something I didn't even want to go with the term God because I had such a
like where
personal
your mom
relationship
is.
with with what I called God. Um, I had such a personal connection to that term in that context of what I was raised believing that using the term was uncomfortable. I said maybe there's something else out there, but this isn't gonna be it. And unlike you, of course, you went back to it in a different way, and I went away from it even further. So it was really interesting to see.
Right. It's
Well,
really it's
so
it's
right now,
funny.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but right now I am gonna have to probably just go ahead and kind of wrap this up. I do got to get some dinner here with my wife and myself before the baby wakes up for some more food.
Right.
Uh,
No, I
but
understand.
before we depart, I would like to maybe next time. Uh, One of the things I mentioned before we started was talking about faith,
Mhm.
because I know there's so many different definitions and ways that people use that word. So
Right.
maybe if we do want to
Yeah.
connect again and talk again, maybe we could make it a chat between maybe kind of figuring out what faith means to you, and then
And what
maybe
about
have,
other
and then you can
religions
talk to
too?
me. Yeah, faith, how it applies to yourself and how it applies to how you see other people, like how their faiths look to you. And then on my end, I'd be willing to put forth my definition, the way that I talk about evolution, because I'll go ahead and say it outright. It's my belief that everybody that rejects evolution does so because they don't understand it. They have a
Okay.
false understanding of what it is. Um, and most people don't think they do, which makes it even more confusing.
Right.
Like, for instance, Kent Hovind does not understand evolution. He thinks he does, but he doesn't. And that's hard to explain. And so it would take a whole chat, you know?
No, that would be great.
And I
What
wouldn't, if
are
we did go that route,
Saturdays?
I wouldn't. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, um I was just gonna say, are Saturdays best for you? Or are Fridays good?
It changes up. My
Okay.
my schedule is very haphazard. They some days or some weeks I have Saturday off. Some weeks I have Tuesday off. I may. have an opportunity Tuesday or Friday, but I'll have to check into that and get back to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, Tuesdays are always a good day or night. Um, so if you're like off on Tuesdays and you want to have a chat during the day because you got time, let me
Mm-hmm.
know. Tuesdays are my day off.
Okay.
I only work Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Oh, okay.
I would like to work more, but my boss has limited me. So,
Gotcha.
but I don't. It gives me more time for what I consider ministry. I mean, not necessarily towards you, but
Yeah.
for the channel.
One of the things in the debate community that we always talk about is at the end of the debate, more than likely, neither of the debaters is changing their mind. And I believe the same thing goes with these kind of discussions. The point is for anybody listening, they may pick up something new that they didn't have before, and it may help them change the way they see things.
Exactly. No, don't get me wrong. Our conversation was really cool, and I have learned a lot, and I look forward to more of them. So tell
Absolutely.
me when you're available. We'll pick different subjects. In fact, I'll let you know on different panel discussions I'm having because it would be great to have an atheist perspective
Yeah,
join
that would be
and say,
fun.
this is where I'm at on that thing. So uh, I feel I'm gonna call it blessed that I've met you, but privileged is good for both of us. I'm
That's a little more universal.
exactly.
It was a
So
great coincidence and a great opportunity. Like I said, this was a direction I've been wanting to take my channel, and having someone so fair-minded and easy to talk with is a good place to start.
awesome. Well, that's great. Real quick, I'm going to stop the broadcast. Don't hang up yet, and
Okay.
we'll get a few specifics. But everybody, I will probably do a open panel, open discussion, or chat room fellowship within the next 30 minutes or an hour. So just pay attention to the chat room or pay attention to the channel for the red light. And guys, thank you for joining. Don't forget to check out Kent's channel, especially since we're going to be having more conversations. So I want to thank everybody who was in the chat room, who's watching it on replay, and Kent especially. I hope you guys all have a great night. Take care and God bless.